Okay, next video. So we've got, let's just recap where we're at. So if you've done the first two, you should have a system where the camera is tracking a point light that we're moving around. So we're moving a point light around and the camera's then tracking it. What we're going to do next is we're going to, when we shoot a ball, at the minute it just breaks, so you can see that that shoots. Remember, gravity's in effect, so you're not exactly shooting where the light is. You have to aim a little bit higher of where you think you're going to shoot. What we're going to do is we're going to create a particle effect, like a smoke effect. Okay, now in order to use particles and create particles, we need to create an empty object. So what we're going to do is we're going to go, I don't know whether I can create them here. No, I don't think I can. No, we'll do it this way. So we'll go up to game object and we'll go create empty. Okay, so there you go, empty game object. Let's give it a name, rename it, and we're going to call it particle container. I'm in a habit of not putting space in things now, but that's what I'm doing. Okay, and we're also going to create, in the hierarchy this time, a particle system. And you'll see that it's dropped on screen and it's going away, it's showing you what it's going to look like. Now what I want to do is I want to make this particle system a sub-object of the particle container. So all I do is in the hierarchy I drag it, and you'll see the little shortcut icon appear. So I've dragged it to particle container, and I'm going to let go. And you'll see that a little arrow indicates that there is a sub-item. Okay, so you can see particle container contains particle system. Now I don't want that on the scene because I'm going to create these dynamically. And generally, if you go into your prefabs folder in your assets, there you go, we've got our bullet there, and this is where we put objects that we're going to create dynamically. So we're going to drag from the hierarchy particle container to the prefab folder. Okay, and you can see that there's a little arrow again to show that there is something inside that container. Now, once that's in your prefab, delete it from the hierarchy because we don't want it on screen. So I'm just going to highlight it and press delete. Okay, so it's gone. So the particle is created, but it will only be available whenever we want it to appear. Okay, that's what prefabs are for. They're pre-built objects that we can generate dynamically. So you do that for like bullets and stuff like that. Okay, in order for this to work, we need to run some code when the bullet hits something. So what we'll do, while we're in the prefabs, we'll go to the bullet and we'll add a script to it. Okay, so I don't know whether you can right click on this and do it. No, so on the bullet, if you look in the inspector, use the scroll bar to go down to the bottom and say add component, and we'll add a script just like we did for the point light that we use as a target. So we can say new script, make sure it says C#, give it a name. So I'm going to call this bullet controller, no spaces for me. I'm going to create the component, and there you can see it's been created. So I want to edit this now, so I'm going to click on that little, I don't know, little like starry spiky ring, and that'll give me some options. I'm going to say edit script. So mono's flashing down here, so it's loaded it up into mono, and you can see we've got this. Okay, now if we look at our camera controller while we've got this code window open, if you haven't, go back to your assets and load your camera controller up in mono. Right, when in that, whenever we clicked fire, we created our bullet object, did we not? And this is how we did it. So we're going to do something similar to this to create the particle. Now in order to do that, we had an object called bullet. So we're going to copy that sort of setup in our bullet controller. So at the top, and we're going to create this as a game object. It needs to be public because we need to associate with it in a minute. So we've got game object, and we're going to call it explosion. Okay. Now in our update and our start code, we don't actually need any code. We need to create a new subroutine. On collision enter. Make sure you spell it properly. Okay, and you need to put the two braces in, an opening and a closing brace, because they mark the beginning and end of the subroutine. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a game object, and we're going to do the exact same format as the camera controller. So we're going to, I know we called it rigid body, but this one's a game object, but it's the same sort of setup. We're going to use the word instance, and we're going to say instantiate. Okay, so back to the bullet controller, so we're going to say instance equals, and then there's a subroutine called instantiate, and you can see it's a subroutine because it comes up in purple or pink, however your eyes treat that. It wants to know what object we want to create, so it's going to be explosion. It wants to know what position. Now we want the position of the bullet, so we're going to say transform, and so if we just put transform, it's referring to the object that we've assigned this code to. So in this case, that object is a bullet, because that's what we added the stuff to. So we want the position. Again, use the picker as much as possible. You can press enter, and then we're going to use something called I can never say this word, quaternion. I don't know how you say it. And we're just going to put identity. Okay, and we're going to say at the end, after we've closed off the parameter list, we're going to say as game object. Okay, so that will create an instance of the explosion when we've set this up in the Unity editor, and we'll come back to that, remember. Okay, so let's save that. I'll just talk about this again. So we're saying create a new object, game object, base it on this explosion, which we haven't set up properly yet. Remember, that's public game object explosion at the top. That is just a rotation angle, so we're just saying a default angle, and we have to put as game object at the end. Okay, right, so we've saved that, and we're going to go back to Unity, and we're going to go back into the prefabs and the bullet. Okay, so I've got the bullet selected. Scroll down until you get to the script, and you can see that that public variable that we created, explosion, is listed, but it says none, so we need to now assign an object. So if we click that little blob, it'll bring up all the assets we've got. So if we scroll down, we should find our particle container. Now you can see it gives you the full name there. It can't display it all there, look, it crops it off, but it's got the full name there. That's the one we want. Okay, so it's now added it to the explosion variable. So it's now active, and we should be able to run this now. So let's run it and see what happens. So we've got our camera following our spotlight. I've got control as my key to shoot, and there you go. But can you see what's happening? As soon as it's colliding, that ball with anything, it's creating particles, and they do never go. They never ever ever go. So I'll show you how to destroy an object after a time period. You can keep going. See how many you can get on screen? Quite a lot. Okay, so let's stop that running and go back to the mono to have a look at our code. Right, so we've created an instance in a local variable here called instance, but we want to kill it. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the keyword destroy, and we're going to say destroy the instance after so many seconds. So I'm going to put 2, but I'm going to change that in a sec. Let's just see if this works. Okay, so save that and go back to Unity and run it again. So you should see that when it runs, yes, it will create the instances, but they will peter out and die. Okay, so every time that ball's hitting something, it's creating instances of that smoke. So what would be nice, if we go back to the code, instead of having that 2, it'd be nice to have a variable for this. So let's have a variable private and it's a floating point value, and we're going to have smoke lifetime, I'm going to call this. I'm going to set it to 2. Now I'm going to set it to 1.5f, which is 1.5 seconds. I'm going to change this 2 to use that variable. Use the picker again. So that makes it more flexible for us. The other thing we're going to do, we're only going to generate the smoke the first time the ball hits something. Now in order to do that, we need to keep track. This subroutine is run every time the ball hits something, but we only want it to generate this smoke the first time it hits something. Now in order to do that, we need to keep a Boolean variable. So up here I'm going to create a Boolean variable, which we put as bool, and we're going to say first contact, and we're going to set that to true. Okay, so that's its default value. Now we're going to use this inside our collision code, and we're going to say if first contact, so we're making a decision, and we're going to wrap this code inside it. So what I've done is I've put my condition in brackets because that's what you have to do in C#. So that's either true or false, so we can use that directly. So the first time into this, first contact we set to true, so it's going to go, yes, that's true, let's do this code. So the braces, the opening and closing brace, mark the code for the true part. So we say, okay, then let's make an explosion, and when we destroy it in a fixed amount of time. We don't want to run that again. So what we're going to do here, we're going to be very clever, and we're going to say first contact equals false. So the first time round, that is true. We'll create an object of smoke, and then we'll generate this. Okay? And then we're going to set that to false, and hopefully that will stop this happening again. So this is a standard thing. It's like a little switch. We're saying, right, turn the collision off. Even though collisions are happening, we don't want anything to carry on. So I've saved that. I'm going to go back to Unity, and I'm going to run it. I hope I'm going to run it. There you go. So, one set of smoke. Let's hit the floor. One set of smoke. It doesn't generate smoke when it hits other bits. Okay. Now if you choose that you want all the smoke every time it hits something, then take that little bit of code out. Let's just prove that that works. So stop it, go back to Unity, just comment that line out, just put a // comments out in C#, save it, run it in Unity, and you'll see that it generates all the smoke. They'll still die after 2 seconds, because every time we generate those, so you can see, as it is floor it generates smoke, as it is the wall it generates smoke. It's up to you how you use that effect. The other thing we've got loads of balls knocking around. So what we might want to do is kill the balls after a little bit of time. And again, we can do that in our code. So all we've got to do is say destroy. If I do it in capitals it might help. Oh, didn't like that. I haven't done something silly somewhere. Right, destroy. I don't know what happened there. Destroy. What do we want to destroy? Well, it's the current game object. Now that starts with a little g. Not the same as that. That is a type. Okay, starts with a capital letter. It's a type. That refers to whatever the script is associated with. So this is the bullet. So we're saying destroy the game object, the bullet, but we'll destroy it after, let's give it a second to live. Okay, let's save that and run. So we'll do a little test. So as soon as it collides, it's got 1 second to live. So I'm going to shoot one onto the floor there, and you can see it's disappeared. So I shoot it onto the floor there, this didn't even make it to the wall. Okay, I'll leave it there. You can play about with this. You can do all sorts of crazy things. You could make the ball get bigger and things once it's hit. Okay, but I quite like it like that. I might do one more thing. We don't need code-wise to keep destroying that object. So I'm going to cut that, put that in here, and I'm going to turn my first contact thing back on. But I decided that I do like the smoke being generated every time it hits something, so I'm going to cut that code and I'm going to paste it outside of that if. Didn't tidy that up very well, but hey, let's just tab it back. Let's have a look at my collision code now. So what I'm saying, always do this, always create smoke every time we find a collision, but only tell the game to destroy the bullet the first time we hit something. So it gets a second to live and then dies. Okay, it's just tidier code. So run it, let's just make sure it still works. So I'm getting lots of smoke generated, but my bullets should be dying after a second, so they don't stay in the scene. That's amazing, didn't know that down. Okay, and that's the end of that video.